You know, when we talk about business acumen, it's really understanding the business from a financial and operational perspective. So let me give you a couple highlights of my involvement with the business. Upper left there is me, BGH, that's before gray hair. I worked in Angola, West Africa for 3.5 years. That's one of my many trips going out to oil platforms in the ocean, on a helicopter. Next to that is a nitinol frame for an acquisition with Medtronic, a core valve, heart valve that was very successful, has been very successful. Next to that, Honeywell Aerospace. That's an APU, an auxiliary power unit that powers the aircraft. And then in the right there was the PB980 ventilator. So when I think about titles, generalist, HR manager, HR business partner, HR specialist, we probably have recruiters, we have comp analysts, we have lots of different people in the room. And add to that many of you are maybe senior in those roles. But when I think about it, what I prefer all us to be known as and referred to is a business partner, plain and simple. However, it's not that easy to get the title of business partner. You really have to earn it. I know it sounds crazy, but you have to learn the business. It sounds really basic. We should all know the business, but it's surprising how many HR professionals really don't understand the business in which they operate. So it's a key thing that you just have to learn. So, you know, what can you learn about the business? Well, you know, there was a really interesting study that was done by IBM in 2012. And what it found when they surveyed CEOs was that 37% of them said HR professionals were more focused on process and rules than learning the business. So think about that. They also said that they wouldn't involve those people in strategic decisions. So that really is a challenge when you're not going to be involved in those important decisions. So what can you do? Well, it's about speaking the language of your leaders, and it's about taking what you know from an HR perspective and translating it into the business and business terms. It's about getting included in decisions. And you know, a really interesting Harris poll that just came out, 81% of senior leaders said when they're hiring HR professionals, they look for business acumen over HR technical skills. So if you don't know the business, it's going to impact your career. So what do? I think the one thing I would leave you with is you have to be intentional about obtaining business acumen. If you think about the last week at work, how many of you actually got outside your cube or your office and learned about the business? A few? Well, so that's great, but you have to make it intentional. All these different things you can go along and do, but you have to find ways to insert yourself into these situations where you can learn more about the business. It's about a saying that I really like is doors will open for those who are bold enough to knock. And that's really it. So getting a mentor, get someone outside of HR. They give you a whole different perspective on what the business is all about and what HR's role in the business is. Really critical one there. I know it's blasphemy, but you see up here, make a lateral move. At DaVita, we have a saying from Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. So if you think about your career objective and work backwards and plan that there's always going to be changes, it's a key thing to know. So how do you know, or how do you continue to enhance your skills? Know the language of the organization. I mentioned before, speak the language of your leaders. You also can't overdo it. You need to know the situation and when it makes sense and not to use jargon for the sake of jargon. That impacts credibility and really impacts your ability to succeed. And lastly, if you haven't, I've got Google Alerts set up on my phone. Anytime DaVita pops up in a news story, I hear about it. So even if it's not my part of the business, I learn exactly what we're doing and what others are saying about us. How do you measure your understanding? People see ROI up here and they say, oh my gosh, I don't know how to calculate a return on investment. You know, I go out and I partner with my finance partners, my ops partners, and I ask them to help me quantify ideas I have, strategies that I might have. It's okay to ask for help, so that's what I would say first and foremost. And lastly, when I meet people, I'm able to talk about our vision, I'm able to talk about our mission, and really have an elevator speech for the organization. I think that's really key if you're going to be successful and if you're going to be able to describe in a succinct way what you do. I go back to this, you have to learn the business. I think if you're going to be different and stand out from the crowd than everyone else in HR, business acumen is key. And what I would say is, I think we just skipped a slide, from a third dimension perspective, learning business acumen is that third dimension, and it really is what differentiates you from other HR professionals. Thanks.